Even the GNC bankruptcy couldn't take down the transformation plans that are happening at FitLife Brands. For those that are not familiar, FitLife Brands is a national provider of nutritional supplements for health-conscious consumers marketed under the following two brand segment names. NDS Products, which are primarily sold through the GNC network, and then iSatori Products, which does have a diversified retail mix. FitLife Brands does trade publicly under the symbol FTLF on the over-the-counter pink market. And just like a lot of my other earnings breakdown, financial breakdown videos, I will be utilizing their earnings report, their conference call, and any other publicly disclosed information or presentation slides to not only explain what's happening in their business, but discuss strategic insights regarding the nutritional supplements market. So let's kind of run down some of the financial numbers recently. Since I haven't done too many pieces of content on FitLife Brands, I want to kind of give you guys a little bit more context of the numbers, just so you guys can understand maybe the last couple of years of what's happening in the business. In 2016, that is recently kind of their best performing top line revenue year, about $25.3 million. If you look at 2017 and 2018, they had down sequential years. Fiscal 18 did get down to $17.1 million in top line revenue. Now, in 2019, they did have an increase that went up to $19.5 million. And then in this year, fiscal 2020, that went up to $21.7 million in top line revenue. Now, if we just look at the 2020 quarter four top line revenue, it was $5.9 million. And that was up 61% year over year, but was down sequentially quarter over quarter of 14%. Now, looking at the 2020 quarter four's gross margins, they were 41.8%. It's pretty hefty, pretty strong. The strength of those margins have been increasing because of more focus on digital sales, and because those are higher margin sales that have kind of quicker cash conversion cycles, they were able to increase their gross margins 350 basis points year over year. Now, talking about those digital sales, just to give you a little bit of perspective of that and how they have progressing in that transformation plan to add more digital sales. The 2020 quarter four digital sales were $1.3 million. That was up 108% year over year. Now, if we look at this just with like the fiscal year total years, in fiscal 2018, they only did $850,000 in digital sales. That increased pretty substantially in 2019. They did about $2.3 million in digital sales. And then this year, throughout the whole year, they did about $4.3 million in digital sales. So a lot has been changing in terms of just their channel mix and where their sales are coming from. But despite a lot of that growth that's been happening over these last couple of years in their digital sales, they are still very much heavy on GNC. And giving you guys a little bit more of a context of the last couple of years of their mix in fiscal 18, 77% came from GNC, 18% came from these other retailers, and then 5% came from digital. Now in 2019, GNC made up 75%, other made up 13%, and digital made up 12%. And now this past year in fiscal 2020, GNC made up only 71%, digital made up 20%, and then other made up 9%. And you might be wondering what's happening to that kind of other retail category. A lot of that has to do with the iSatori Products section of FitLife brand portfolio. Those are stocked in a lot of other kind of specialty or mass or large retailers. The iSatori products have been kind of slowly dying off in the market. They've been struggling. So that's really kind of hurt the mix of the business in terms of that other retail category. I do want to mention this idea of like key customer risk. And this happens all too often, especially with brands that get in with a large retail early on in their business. All of a sudden, your 30% of the business is coming from one account, 50% up to 70% or more. And it doesn't seem all that bad when the goings are good. But what happens when kind of things start to break down? And in this kind of scenario, we're looking at GNC and their bankruptcy that did happen in 2020. Now your company is essentially pegged to the performance of somebody else's company. And when your company is dependent on another company, you really are kind of playing with fire. You're one decision away from totally getting your business wiped out. So even with a lot of the growth that's happening on the digital channel for FitLife Brands, they still are very much pegged to the performance of GNC. And the bankruptcy should have really hurt them a ton, and it did hurt them, but it didn't hurt them to the level that maybe a lot of people expected. And that's primarily because a lot of the problems, or a lot of like the closures and things that were happening with the GNC bankruptcy, was happening on the corporate side, those corporate owned store locations, and mostly on the domestic side. And then FitLife Brands is primarily sold through franchise locations in the domestic market and some in the international markets as well. So they weren't affected as much as they could have if they were sold primarily through the corporate stores at GNC. That being said, I don't think there should be any sighs of relief inside the four walls of FitLife Brands, because even though they were able to kind of get themselves out of this difficult situation, I still believe most, or not all, of the GNC network is still in a very fragile state right now. So for me, I would be really looking at trying my best to siphon off any of those GNC customers into my own funnel through loyalty programs or some other mechanism that could get me to some of that first party data, to get me to have access to these customers, so then I can make sure that they're into my brand experience and I'm able to better control my destiny in the future. Product development of the brand, just kind of touch on a little bit there. The portfolio as a whole introduced 32 new SKUs within 2020, 12 of which were totally new products, and then 20 were product reformulations or kind of flavor variants or size variants. And all in all, the products within the FitLife Brands portfolio is still very much like dinosaur era sports nutrition products. So very much caps, powders, pills, not necessarily looking at where the market's shifting in terms of active nutrition, but with a strengthened balance sheet, I do think the company can take a lot more risk in their product development pipeline in the year to come. So where does FitLife Brands go from here? The company has bought back more than $1 million in shares. I think they have several more millions of dollars in share buybacks that are authorized. They have an extremely cleaned up balance sheet that also has lines of credit that aren't touched and over $6 million in cash that are on the books. It's time to consider opening up the playbook and throwing some passes downfield. If all goes well organically in 2021, they should get back to that fiscal year 2016 numbers of that $25 million a year. But is that all the growth appetite within the four walls of the FitLife brand offices? 10 to 20% year-over-year growth over the next couple of years. I sense that the team is ready for more bigger moves. And what could be those moves exactly? I think the first one and the most obvious one is that they could be looking for some mergers and acquisitions targets. If I were them, I'd be leaning towards somebody that's digital first, has a strong hold in both Amazon or direct-to-consumer sales, somebody that has a functional food or beverage as kind of their hero SKU. And then if you're not able to find a seller or a brand that you could buy that is at an appropriate market valuation, I think at that point you need to create your own brand. You need to create and fill the holes within your portfolio. My suggestion would be, though, that they work with somebody from the outside to get some fresh ideas on the brand portfolio and kind of really drive some new creative ideas. In my opinion, everything currently in their portfolio in terms of brands and products are really kind of transactional, and they're really driven off the backs of the sales efforts that happen within the stores at GNC. The next addition to the portfolio, be that they build it or they buy it, really needs to be focused on a brand first experience, and it should seek to become the keystone digital asset that they can build long-term brand portfolio strategies around. FitLife Brands leadership continues to show that they can run a sound operational business. But I continue to fear that they need stronger visionary voices that can drive this business to being $100 million plus in top line revenue over the next 3 to 5 years. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to help support me, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up button on this video. If this is the first time you've been introduced to my videos, would love for you guys to be a part of my community by subscribing to my channel. I upload several videos just like this weekly. And if you guys want to connect further outside of this platform, I do include all of my social media links down below. I just want to thank you guys again for your time. Hopefully I gave you some value in return, and we'll see you guys on the next video.